if we are able to actually expose to the child the processes rather than the contents themselves. They are the center of their universe. The entire universe is actually in them. Probably in the initial period, try to find out as many different things as possible.
Good morning. Today we have the honor of speaking with Padma Shri Aluru Kiran Kumar, one of India's most distinguished space scientists with a long, productive career spanning over 4 decades in the Indian Space Research Organization in the satellite payload and applications domains. Dr. Kiran Kumar is a Vikram Sarabhai Distinguished Professor at ISRO, and he was the Secretary, Department of Space, Chairman, Space Commission, and Chairman, Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, from 2015 to 2018. Thank you, sir, for speaking with Agastya, and we look forward to sharing your insights and advice with our young science buffs. We will get to it right away. On their behalf, my first question to you, sir, is you have such a formidable list of achievements and accomplishments and awards, and it can be quite daunting to a young student who's aspiring to explore science in general, space in particular, and they wonder, how can I get there? But you were an aspiring scientist as well once in your younger years. So, can you tell us very briefly what in your background and in your youth led you to choose science?
Yeah, thank you very much for this opportunity to participate in this program of Agastya. It's indeed a pleasure to actually share our experience as we have grown up. See, I was born and brought up in a place called Hassan, which is a small town, not a very big town, but a decent town, and which was also known for a lot of cultural activities there because within about 20-mile radius of Hassan, you have places like Belur Hadebid, which has one of the finest sculptures in the temple complex. Then you have Shravana Belagala, which has a 58 feet statue of Gomateshwara on the mountain. And there are a lot of, and the place itself is a typical Malnad where you have a lot of rains and drizzling happening most of the time. So when I was growing up in that place, some of the things that we were exposed to was the kind of interest in science and chemistry, physics, because my brothers used to be very, you can say, indulgent in some of the activities. My elder brother, he was also teaching initially in Polytechnic, and he had set up at home a wood lathe made of for woodworking, and then he had a lot of small engines which were being, he was assembling part of engine parts. And then another brother of mine was actually keen on doing chemical experiments. He had a wooden box in which he will have a test tube, beakers, and then sodium put in water, potassium permanganate, a lot of such things. And apart from that, of course, we had typical experience of making use of what is available to us in the nature to do certain very specific activities. One such example is a shaft of light which enters through a small hole in the tiles. The entire room, you make it dark, and this shaft of sunlight, you reflect it through a mirror onto a wall, or even it could be a dhoti, white dhoti, and then put a transparent paper in between and write on that. So you have almost like an overhead projector operating. And depending on your own skills, you can do small animation by writing moving parts. That means by bringing in pictures at some interval. So, and then this kind of activities, and apart from that, of course, the idea of looking at sky, identifying the constellations and then seeing them were all coming in. We were growing up in such an environment. So the nature always provided us with a fantastic gamut of things in which if you have interest, you can explore further. And in the home also, we were a large family of many siblings, and so we had the opportunity to do all kinds of you can say play, but at the same time, interest in education and interest in science was natural to us. And to that, for that, we also need to really give a lot of credit to our parents, because they allowed us to explore what we wanted to do without putting too much of pressure on us that we should do this or we should do that, but at the same time setting some kind of a target. For example, I remember once my father told me, see, when he is walking in the road, he would like to be told that he is father of such and such a person. And so that in a way sets a sort of a target for you, saying that you should grow into something, you should achieve something in life. So without putting too much of pressure, allowing you to explore what you are seeing in the nature, retaining your curiosity and developing are some of the things which we had the opportunity during our childhood days. But I'm not very sure the same is true today. But then it's only those children who are able to actually understand this particular concept, that they are the center of their universe. The entire universe is actually in them, and they need to decide what they want to do. They need to explore, talk to all the people whom they have access to, parents, teachers, and anybody else. Be curious, ask questions, but then don't be actually suppressed or afraid of receiving spankings or being told you are irrelevant or whatever it is. But retain your curiosity and move ahead. I think it was this which we were somehow able to develop as part of our childhood careers. And this is what, over a period of time, without trying to be too much demanding on ourselves that I need to achieve this, but keep generally a target that you should do something significant which others around you can take note of. I think that in a nutshell is the kind of childhood we had. And we had, for example, not any one field, science and technology alone, but also even in arts, because all my sisters were being formally taught music. And then we used to participate in drama. And then I also remember as a child, once I had gone to my brother's school day function, and they had conducted a almost 1.5 hours to 2 hours drama with 10 or 12 participants. After coming back from that, I was able to do Ekapatra Vinay. That means as an individual, perform the entire drama. So the kind of exposure to arts also was there. And so it was you can say, sort of a holistic development, giving due importance to all aspects of life.
From an educator's perspective, I would like to ask, how do you keep the joy and excitement of discovery in science or art in any field? How do they work on that? Because these days, the burden of mainstream education is quite cumbersome, not just on the child, but also on the educator. There are very, very strict prescriptions for how a certain subject should be taught, what kind of milestones should be achieved. So, from an educator's perspective, what would you recommend for children to be taught science well?
I think from the today's scenario, like you're pointing out, is really very challenging, because the world as such is moving at faster and faster pace, in the sense that the amount of things that we see changing around us is so huge. You take any domain, the changes are happening faster and faster. There is an increasing competition. There are probably, by trying to say that you should be number one, number two kind of thing, puts a lot of pressure on the upcoming or young kids. But what probably the real challenge is, how can we inform them of various happenings which are relevant for them in the coming years and decades, but at the same time, enabling them to learn the process of learning. I think if we are able to teach the child the process of learning, and for learning how he has to actually attempt and what are the means and ways by which it can actually learn new things, I think we would have done a great job if we are able to actually expose to the child the processes rather than the contents themselves. See, to a large extent, many of the education system, which we also went through, put great emphasis on the contents rather than the processes. So as a result of that, while that mechanism would have been okay for a slow changing pace society, today that kind of mechanisms are not going to be appropriate or working. And that is where I think the more and more both the educators and also who are in the process of providing education to the next generation are looking at the mechanisms, what you are telling, giving them experiential learning activities. And this is where the newer and newer kit-based activities which helps them to learn the process. See, for example, if I were to tell, if I have a problem to solve, first thing is I need to identify what is the actual problem I'm addressing. How well can I define that problem? And the better I define the problem, then I can look at what kind of solutions, what are the different paths that are available, what are the different steps, and how to get information about those processes, where to look for. Today, we are flooded with data and information, but we also have the challenge of knowing which one is right, which one is not right. I think, in my view, if we are able to communicate to them the processes and also give them more opportunity to do physical activities, because it is one thing to read about something, but then the moment you start doing it yourself, you realize that you need lot more skills than just comprehending what has been read. So it is also our physical and actual skills that are important. And it is in this area also the experiential learning becomes very important. To me, these are the two important aspects which the educators need to understand and then try and bring in their process of teaching children.
One of the things that strikes me from the point of view of a young child looking at doing science, perhaps specifically space, being a space scientist like yourself, many young students dream of joining NASA, but at ISRO you have an enviable list of accomplishments that even NASA would be hard pressed to accomplish. Given our background and our limitations, we have still managed to accomplish so much more with limited capital and resources in some cases. Can you share for our children some of the highlights of our Indian space research, arena, and what is unique about them in the world of space research?
I think this is a real fundamental aspect of Indian Space Research Organization itself, how it approached the whole process of making use of space technology as a tool for improving the living conditions and the growth of India as a nation. You can imagine in 1947, we got our independence. And in 1957, the first object was put into space by Russia. So the use of space as a mechanism, but that time, the Russians and Americans were actually competing with each other. It was a Cold War era, and then who was more militarily dominant, and they were trying to establish themselves as superior powers in the global context. And in our country, for example, we had a great visionary scientist, Dr. Vikram Sarabhai, who was actually looking at this space technology, how this new technology can enable India as a country to actually overcome the problems it was facing, how science and technology, which is at the core of the human civilization's improved ability to survive in this planet and better living conditions, how can we make use of new technologies for the benefit? So, for example, he was aware, and also by that time it had been shown. For example, Arthur Clarke had said that if you can put an object at 36,000 kilometers in the equatorial plane, the time it takes for that object to go around Earth is exactly 24 hours, which is the time Earth takes to go about around its own axis. So, because of the relative velocity becoming zero, this object will appear as a tower at that height. That means you can continuously see that object from one third of the globe. So line of sight communication is possible. So from this position, if you are beaming signals like television signal, one third of the globe can receive that. And then you can also do telecommunication. You can look at cloud cover and its movement and talk about predicting cyclones and looking at them. So what he was trying to look at is how can we make use of the space technology to bring in improved communication within the country, and then improved broadcasting, and then looking at clouds and then cyclones, and then telling our long coastline that when the cyclone will hit, so that tens of thousands of people who will lose their lives in the presence of cyclonic super cyclone activities. So he was clear that if India were to make progress, it has to adopt the newer technologies. And if in those new technologies, if we bring in essential capability as a country, we can actually benefit. It was his vision of using space technology as a tool for India's benefit. I'll just give you a couple of examples how he was able to get this implemented. The first experiments were done in India using sounding rockets. Those sounding rockets were brought to India by Dr. Sarabhai by convincing fellow scientists globally that in India, near Trivandrum, we have a geomagnetic equator, and upper atmospheric research in that place is a unique information set which will be beneficial to the global scientific community. So if you allow us to assemble these sounding rockets and send some instruments and go to the upper atmosphere, make some measurements, it will be beneficial to the global scientific community. But in that process, we also learn the process of putting rockets, building them, etc. So this was done in the 60s, early 60s. And even the very first time the rocket had to be put, it was getting assembled in a dilapidated church in the beaches of that place. And Dr. Sarabhai had to actually convince the fishermen with the help of the priest that you vacate this place and allow us to conduct these experiments so that one day in future, India will benefit. But this was possible. And so we started that activity like bringing in the form of kids, and through that experience of handling them, learning the art of building rockets. So in that direction, one activity started. Then in the second direction it was done is he worked with Americans and convinced them that they should allow one of their most advanced technology satellite called ATSF to be brought over Indian longitude, and for 1 year allow us to make use of the broadcasting capability of that satellite to beam signals over India and in 2,400 remote villages of our country. At that point of time in 1975, when only 4 metros had the capability of seeing the television, he was able to convince Americans and convince the government that we should do this experiment. And for 1 year, in these 2,400 villages using something similar to our direct-to-home television today, establishing direct to community sets using black and white television sets, etc. In these 2,400 villages, for 1 year, television broadcasting was done, telling them about agricultural practices, health, and various information relevant to the villagers. And also, you can imagine a politician able to communicate with the rest of the country while he is speaking in Delhi or when she is speaking in Delhi can be heard all over the country. But basically, the point was he was able to convince and demonstrate that this is the mechanism. Because otherwise, if at that point of time, India were to follow the process of putting towers every 1 kilometer, microwave towers, and then establish ground transmission, and through that reach the entire 3.25 million square kilometers of India, not only it would have taken large amount of resources, but also time. So this was shown. That's how the INSAT series got approved and then started happening. So similarly, like in the for example, what I was talking about the fishermen, later by putting satellites looking at the color of the ocean and through the color identifying the chlorophyll, and through that the food chain of the fish, we were able to tell the fishermen in our long 7,500 kilometer long coastline where to go for fishing from 1999 onwards. So you can see, and apart from that, cyclone prediction, telling the farmers or even the government about what crops are being grown, where to drill bore wells. So in all this, what Dr. Sarabhai had envisioned was make use of space technology to improve the quality of life, improve the education, reach information to the public, and then provide specific information about disasters or in terms of planning. So in all this, by putting objects in space, you are able to bring in a capability. And in doing all this, the amount of resources that was required and was not much. Obviously, you can imagine even today when there are question marks about whether we should have gone to Mars or Chandrayaan, etc. But you can imagine at that time why big countries should be spending on rockets, etc., etc. were there. But then what was shown has been shown by ISRO is within the limited resources made available and with very innovative approaches to many of the problems, we were able to provide effective solutions to the problems we are facing in the country, whether, like I said, whether it's communication or navigation or meteorology, remote sensing, or even looking at beyond the Himalayan borders or across the globe, etc. In all these places, making use of the limited resources available and taking advantage of whatever you have technology access to you and what is not accessible, indigenize them, build within the country. That's how all the areas of rocket building, satellite building, applications, everything was done. And you can also imagine necessity also becomes a big driver. When you do not have resources, innovation becomes a natural outcome. How to make use of it, make use of whatever skills that you are able to develop and make those skills reach the end requirements you have. I'll just give a couple of examples. Initially, when the satellite was to be built for broadcasting, communication, and meteorology, at that point in time, these three capabilities were not present in a single satellite. But since India was looking for less expenditure, we could not afford three launches, three satellites, and the whole gamut of things. India was able to design a three-in-one satellite, communication, broadcasting, and meteorology. All these three were put into a single satellite, and such a satellite had not been built up to that point of time. So we were actually ready to take that risk of trying to build such a thing, though the first series was built by an American company. But even for them, it was a challenge, and it was required because we were trying to reduce the resource requirements of the country for providing these capabilities. Second generation onwards, we built our own satellite, and then similarly in remote sensing, we made use of the friendship of Indo-Russia and Russians offering us to support some satellite programs, Aryabhata, Bhaskara, and then subsequently we built our remote sensing. So, and then if you look at navigation, we built a constellation of only 7 satellites, while rest of the world, Americans, Russians, Chinese, and Europeans built a 24 to 32 satellite constellation for providing this positioning information. But though we are covering only 1,500 kilometers beyond the Indian borders, our requirement is our country's requirement first. And then for that, if we can achieve with less resources, so be it, and that's how we moved ahead. So the primary point was use the new technology capability to address specific problems you are facing and make it known and make it available. So even the government is seeing, it is not finding it too difficult to explain to through those that whatever resources we are using, we are able to take advantage of the technology and then provide capabilities and resources and facilities to the common people in the country, which is enabling the country to grow. This is how the India's outlook of using space technology as a tool for development of a developing nation is the key difference with respect to the progress that we have made. And it is in this context, a lot of people working in the organization are able to see the big picture, though they may be contributing to a small component of the whole thing. See, whether I'm working for a rocket or a satellite or a payload or an application, each one of these scientists and engineers, technicians, and all the people, they're working on a small component, but all of them are contributing to the real big picture of making use of the space technology, reaching out to the common man, telling him about whether it is a fisherman who does not know reading or writing, is able to make use of in his handheld gadget the video compass mode, pointing him to the direction of fishing and then alerting him if the coming days it is going to be very unwieldy or sea state is going to be rough. So like this, in all this, you can see that if your aim is clear, your direction of work is clear, lot of things can be achieved even with limited resources. That is what ISRO has constantly strived for and demonstrated. That is why globally also, though we may be 5th or 6th in many specific activities, if you take launching or if you take satellite, etc., every one of them appreciates that India is able to use this space technology for bringing up the development in the country.
That is wonderful. I mean, you have outlined a long and illustrious history of achievements at the grassroots level, making a difference to how we function as a nation in terms of communication, in terms of climate and meteorological, predictions, and helping farmers and fishermen. That is wonderful. In fact, I think a lot of people are not aware of this background of the Space Research Organization's work in this area. Part of the communication that we saw in the media when Mangalyaan happened and Chandrayaan happened was the role of women in ISRO, who came to the forefront and led many of these programs, which makes us one of the most progressive space research organizations in the world. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. See, the key thing is, within the organization or even in our own this thing, the role of individuals, in a sense, we really do not look at things as a man, women, etc. All that we are looking at is an individual with a set of skills, knowledge base, and a capability. And whoever is able to do a better job of that naturally gets those kinds of positions simply because of the need for identifying the right type of skills and ability for a job is what is looked at. And it is in this context that this kind of discussion, at least in my own whatever career I have had in ISRO, I have not seen in any discussion something coming as because it's a lady or that kind of a thing. For the particularly in terms of work, but in terms of benefits, maybe there may be some other discussion that might happen. But in terms of identifying people for the work and then giving them the due recognition, etc., has never been a real problem. Simply because what is being looked at is, like, again, the resources available for achieving is always limited. And when you have limited resources, you try to make the best use of everything that is available to you. And it is here that individuals who have their ability and their perseverance and focus are able to overcome many other limitations which may occur. As definitely, it's easy to see a lady or a woman will have much more things going in her mind apart from what she's working in the whether it's in the laboratory or in the actual workspace, etc. But then during that period, how to maybe ignore all other thought processes and then go ahead and contribute. If that kind of an environment is provided, they are also able to achieve, is what ISRO as an organization has shown. And it has shown that people can rise to very high levels and then actually be recognized for what they are doing. But what makes a difference in ISRO as an organization was all the time the demand is so much more than the resources you have. So the only way you can succeed and make a difference to the things around you is make the best use of everything that is available to you. And it is here that this makes a difference. And we are able to see that lot more contribution of women is actually happening.
I think it's also extremely important from the point of view of young girl children looking at science, looking at space technology, seeing themselves represented
Correct.
in these women who are working at the forefront of this career. And it is a chance for young girls to think of this as a career, to not be limited by the fact that their gender may get in the way. It, as you said, it's all about skill. It's about their learning. It is about their skill. It is about their capabilities. So when they look in the media and see this team of women who are behind this huge accomplishment for the country in terms of space, a young girl child could be hugely inspired and motivated. So yes, it is about skill and capability, but it's also about representation, I feel. It
Yeah.
inspires young girls, not just to be limited, because as you know, in rural and urban areas, young girl children are still limited in many ways by our societal practices. And so when they look at these women, they say, I too can do that.
Definitely that's correct. And that's where, for example, the role models or actually some examples will make a huge difference. And I think it's here one more thing that's very important is as an individual, that every individual or every child is actually is a great scientist
Correct.
to start with. And then if he is able to actually keep that process of being curious to know why, what, how things, and then keep questioning people around himself or herself, and then move on. I think it is here. And another fundamental difference is when we talk about experiential thing, I think women bring in a very perspective which is fundamentally different to me, because as you keep going, let's say when you are looking at beyond the planet Earth and you are looking at habitation much elsewhere, etc., life has a essential requirement, and those who understand life better actually will be able to also appreciate this aspect of how, if you are exploring new things and if you are looking at building habitation elsewhere, etc., what is involved in making sustaining life, creating life is also a very important thought process. And in this, I think there is a fundamental advantage, I would think. But then it needs to be actually recognized and then provided those opportunities and allow appropriate set of people to perform.
Sir, in preparation for this interview, I had the opportunity to talk to a couple of young kids who are interested in science and space. And I asked them, what would you like me to speak to Dr. Kiran Kumar about? Couple of questions came up, primarily from the point of view of a career in science. What kind of potential does a scientific researcher find in the Indian job market in terms of career opportunities? And how does a young child who's aspiring to be a professional scientist, how do they approach these goals? What should they focus on once they've started out?
Choosing a particular field, etc., at the very young age may be a very difficult task because you also do not have exposure to how very many different things. And then probably in the initial period, my suggestion would be try to find out as many different things as possible. Look at them and see what is involved in them. And more than anything else, try to find out how you can learn things more important than what specifically you learn. But what this would put a demand is you need to explore in different directions and see whether it is, for example, whether you need to be very strong in only physics, chemistry, mathematics, biology, etc. But today the whole thing is becoming so interdisciplinary that even if you want to explore your skill or your career in life sciences alone, but then there is so much of electronics involved in the instrumentation that is required for extracting new information from the processes, then computational sciences. But there are also the tools that are available. And then if you want to make a contribution to the fundamental tools, then the way you need to approach the problem is very different from if you want to make use of the tools and find solutions to the problems. So the basic thing here would be whether I would like to pursue my career in a particular field. If I make up that mind, then definitely I need to go into how to do the detailed acquisition of knowledge and then how to acquire and in which institutions that knowledge is available. See, for example, if you are talking about Indian Institute of Science or Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, there are many institutions where some fundamental work is being done through science discoveries are happening, which will actually become applications much later. But then if we are keen on applying science and technology to problems of today, and we want to be solution providers of today and tomorrow, rather than trying to find out what can be beneficial few decades later, this is where the fundamental difference has to come. Do I want to become a solution provider today, or do I want to look at how things can help tomorrow? I think this is one of the key things that they have to actually grapple with. There are no easy answers to this problem. Every individual has to find through the process of whatever things are accessible to it, and then be curious enough to know as many things as possible and keep your final decision of whether you will go into fundamental science or applied technology to as late a point in your life as possible. That would be my suggestion. Don't try to make that decision very early in your school days.
You have touched upon what was going to be my next question as well, which is there are so many global challenges that young scientists face today, from climate change to infectious diseases to research about space, deep space. In your opinion, what are the arenas in science that need greater attention and examination in the world today? Not just for today, for tomorrow.
Yeah.
Could you highlight some of these?
Yeah. See, I think this is again a very important aspect. See, science and technology as it evolved, science itself or a particular its concept itself, they are neutral. There is nothing like good science or bad science. But what is good or bad is how we as human beings use certain concept for the benefit of the society, or at some point in time, the so-called benefit also is being driven by management approach to the extent of showcasing certain rapid, quick, so-called progress without worrying about the impact of how that outcome has come. In a sense, for example, I'll just try to illustrate with an example so that it becomes clear. See, what I'm trying to tell is, see, at the end of the World War II, there were a lot of companies which were working in like dynamites and explosives, etc., etc. And when the World War ended, many of these companies had to find ways and means by which their chemical factories or chemical explosives, these things, they could find alternate ways of providing, you can say, their own survival, and then you can say in some ways their growth also. So they came up with what fertilizers, and then use of fertilizers, trying to keep telling people that this fertilizer is a panacea for many things, etc. So one is trying to oversell whatever products you are making. This example you can see not only in this, a host of other areas. And similarly, doing rapid development, that means even whether it is mining the earth resources that are available, or even coal, for example, as a result of that, or petrol. In all this, see what we as the humans on this planet Earth have done in the process of maximizing our returns to the activities we are doing, which we are calling it as progress in many ways. See, there are certain things which is definitely a progress. If you see that the kind of physical labor an individual has to do today for survival is much less than what was required centuries or millennia back. And the kind of tools that are available for you to do various things are much simpler today compared to earlier. But then in achieving this standard, have we overexploited the resources that are available on this planet Earth? This is where the traditional or conventional wisdom of civilizations like ours, which makes a difference. That means planet Earth is an entity, and in its entirety we have to look at. We cannot be looking at human beings alone, that everything that is available on this planet Earth is for the benefit of the human being, ignoring rest of the things that are there, not allowing the resources to form in their process of recycles or regeneration process. See, if you, for example, we are all quite familiar with the story of the golden goose thing. So the person tries to kill the goose to get all the golden eggs. And this is precisely what has been happening for a long time. And because of this, we have ended up with in the process of rapid development, we have created enough problems for survival of life on this planet Earth. So as a result of this, multiple things are happening. You are hearing people like Elon Musk talking of making humans a multi-planetary species. Why is he speaking of that? In a way, if Earth does not remain habitable, we should find somewhere else to go and then stay. While that thought process is okay, not a bad thought process, but then why are we making this planet Earth uninhabitable?
Yes.
Can we not make sure that we do things in such a way that life sustains on this? People can come, remain on this planet Earth. This is where the conventional wisdom of treating the entire planet as one entity, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, or whatever we call, etc., and even Agastya Foundation, I'm sure, has tried to actually showcase the conventional wisdom of our great sages, etc., who have tried to show that we can make use of what is accessible to us in a manner without overusing them, over exploiting them, and creating a scenario where the coming generations are going to find it difficult. Today, in the rapid development of science and technology and the management approach of not worrying about the impact of what we have achieved. The process of doing that is causing so much damage. And when it becomes an unbearable event, you start focusing on that, like plastic usage or renewable resources, like this, all of that. Only when it has become a problem, you focus attention. Instead of that, try and look at the entire process and then try to improve the scenario. If I were to give just one example, when we were in the initial days, we had gone to Russia for one of the launch activities. We were taken to a place across Volga. They had built a huge dam. And then that dam, they were also using it as hydroelectric power plant. So when we went there, they were showcasing that how this facility is established, how these turbines operate, power gets generated. All that was shown. But we were also shown there was a lift called fish lift. So they were showing that something comes up, lot of fish is there. There is a camera which takes the picture of that, and then the lift goes down, and the fish is transported from downstream to upstream and left. So we were wondering what's happening here. There's a hydroelectric power plant and this. See what they had found when they constructed this dam across the Volga River. Solomon fish, which goes from ocean to the freshwater joint for laying its eggs, its path got blocked. The fishermen started, because the caviar, which is a delicacy and a huge export market of Russia, got significantly affected. So then the fishermen started catching the fish downstream, take it upstream and leave it. Then the government did this fish lift business and tried to transport them. So you are obstructing a natural process in your thing. Actually, examples are very many, but I'm just trying to highlight one. And just one other example for the conventional wisdom versus over exploitation of today's management approach. We had a professor in Mysore who is actually, when he became a medical doctor in the early 70s, he and a group of his friends actually dedicated their life for providing education and healthcare to tribal people. And he's also teaches management in some of the institutions. So one example he was actually quoting. He was going along with a tribal father and son pair. And then at one place, there is a huge tree, and on the tree, there is a beehive. And then son climbs the tree. He's carrying a blanket and a sickle. And after climbing, he puts the blanket around himself, picks the queen bee, puts it on his shoulder. All those bees come onto his body. And then he takes his sickle, cuts off 3/4 of the beehive. And then after that, that is collected by the father at the ground using his blanket. And then the son puts the queen bee back into the hive, and all the bees go back there. And then he comes down. Now the professor asks the father, see, we all teach our people management is maximizing your returns. But I see here you are only making use of 3/4 and 1/4 you have left there. Why did you do that? Why are you not making the entire use of that? But what the father tells him is something we need to really appreciate. He says, as it is, we are eating into the fruits of this colony of bees. We need to take it for our medical requirements, medicinal value it has got, and what is essential for us. We should not over-exploit that. So this thought of trying to take from whatever resources you have, what you need, rather than maximizing the returns at the cost of over-exploiting. This is a concept. And this is still deep-rooted in their minds when they're making use of forest produce, etc., etc. Compare it with the technologies or the new enterprises which come, which tries to make every penny or every paisa out of the paisa that is invested.
Correct. No, the confluence of industry and policy makers to oversee this kind of approach is very, very critical, is it not? And I was going to also ask you, in the education of youngsters so that they can adopt this kind of approach to science and technology, a more productive, constructive approach rather than a destructive approach. It's very crucial for industry also to collaborate, and for, say, the government and the Department of Education also to perhaps consider a more holistic approach to education, so that these important things are also covered in our whatever we are imparting to youngsters.
The challenge is science, technology, and as new capabilities and new ways of doing things keep cropping up. How to balance this over emphasis on results without worrying about the impact? And that part of the teaching, and that is where even the education has to make them know that while certain things happened in the past, it also created these kinds of problems. And it's always important for us to look at the holistic approach of addressing. But again, it's a real challenge to the life on planet itself. See, for example, I just want to tell today, those who are actually have the task of managing things and running the, let's say, country as a group, they are the people who are in the power. They get elected, they come for a certain period of time. And then every person or every group which comes wants to showcase that they have done a better job than the other one. Or that is a general intention. But at the same time, they are faced with problems. It's like firefighting. Today I have to solve a problem today, or even I should have solved the problem day before yesterday for the situation to be better. That means they're always forced with the condition where they have to find solution which is immediate. So what is that solution they can adopt? Even if we tell they should make informed decision, they should be told, see, if you adopt this, these are the consequences. If you adopt this, these are the consequences. If we are able to tell them, I'm sure definitely there will be enough wise people who will not stick to gain everything for the gain of immediate gain. But then even to provide them that knowledge and that information base, what solution we need to adopt for solving what problem we are facing right now requires an effective study and analysis. This is where scientists really come into the picture for future. That means if they are able to visualize the kind of problems and then try to find methods which will work, which will sustain and allow life to go on without getting impacted, without becoming, whether it is climate change, what we are seeing, or whether it's over exploitation of non-renewable resources, all of this becomes an essential part. And this is the real challenge, both to the people who are formulating the curriculum, those who are teaching the children, and children themselves. They should really be seeing what is happening around them and try to keep questioning the people around them with their innate curiosity. And they should sustain that curiosity in spite of being spanked, in spite of being put down, or in spite of being whatever. I think that is a real challenge. Life is full of challenges. If there is no challenge, why would a human being with such tremendous potential be required to put all his resources and learning new things, etc.? So life will continue to be a challenge, and how to face those challenges are the issues. And every new year brings in new challenges. And that is where the human being is a fantastic, you can say, a gadget in this universe with ability to perform the way he wants, depending on his choice of things. And if we are able to actually communicate to the child, potential is immense. What he or she achieves is basically dependent on his or her choice of things. And it is here that if we are able to actually bring them to the level of appreciating that, we would have done the job of educating them or giving them an opportunity.
Thank you so much, sir. On that note, I think we have had such an illuminating conversation. We are very grateful that you were able to make this time for us. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much, and wishing Agastya Foundation a great future in trying to form, you can say, not only guide and also actually inspire more and more people of understanding that the conventional wisdom in this country was all the time looking at how to sustain life rather than trying to improve our lot at the cost of so many things else. So let me wish Agastya Foundation also a great future in this endeavor of bringing back the traditional wisdom and bringing back the ability of individuals to survive on this planet Earth and look beyond this universe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.